Hi guys and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to share with you the best strategies to invade the UK in Götterdämmerung as of the latest patch, both for majors and for minors, by sea and by air. If that sounds interesting, then this is the right video for you. If you have any doubts, feel free to ask in the comments and to join our Discord to meet our amazing community. Of course, if you have been enjoying the content I make, please do not forget to support the channel by liking the video, subscribing and leaving a comment. And that's really all for the introduction, so let's get started. For today's guide I will showcase the invasion with 3 different countries, a major, Germany, and 2 minors, Hungary and Mexico. And by the way, in the description of the video you can find the links to each of those country guides. Now, as you know, the Götterdämmerung update made it significantly more difficult to invade the UK. Both their fleets and their armies are now prioritizing defending the mainland a lot better. Most of the Royal Navy is protecting the sea regions around the UK, they have divisions along the entire coast, and they have some new special decisions that allow them to spawn additional militia and units when invaded. In addition to that, they will also quickly move back most of their divisions from colonies and from the African theater. In short, what all of this means is that if you lose your momentum in England, you will find yourself fighting an insane amount of British divisions in each tile, often resulting in your complete annihilation. So, what do we do? Well, first of all, as usual, we need to get there. And luckily this part did not change that much. In my opinion, the easiest option, by far, is still to go by sea. As despite the fact that the Royal Navy now defends a lot better than before, they still leave some gaps open for us, and all we really need is 1 second of green sea to trigger our invasion. Now, for example, here you can see how our default German Navy is more than enough to get the naval superiority in the channel and to trigger our naval invasion. Especially if you can also get the air superiority, which shouldn't be a problem as Germany. In this other run as Hungary, we actually have an even bigger fleet since we first defeated the Axis and stole the German and Italian navies. Now let me remind you that to steal navies in the peace conference you also need the By Blood Alone DLC. In this last run as Mexico, we actually have a very modest fleet. As you can see, we mostly have submarines and destroyers, partially built by us and partially stolen from other American countries. But the thing is, even if you cannot get the naval superiority at first, sometimes the Royal Navy will briefly disappear from the channel. Now, I saved exactly at that moment, and as you can see here, we get a 100% naval superiority. The enemy supremacy is 0, which means the Royal Navy is not assigned to the English channel at all at this time. Now, I am not exactly sure why this happens, possibly because they are repairing or they are engaged somewhere else. For example, in this case, they are attempting a naval invasion of Cuba, which is under our control, so we can assume that most of the Royal Navy is engaged in this area. But regardless of the reason, that's all we really need, 1 second of green sea to trigger our naval invasion. And our naval invasion is now ongoing. Now the UK sent back their fleet, we lost the naval superiority, but it is already too late for the UK as we already managed to disembark our divisions and to capture 1 and soon 2 ports. I noticed that this thing, getting green sea with full naval superiority, happens a lot more often when someone else with a navy is engaged in the war. For example, as Germany, when you're fighting the UK alone, this doesn't happen very often. But if you call Italy into the war, then the Royal Navy starts giving us more opportunity gaps as they are fighting Italy somewhere else in the Mediterranean Sea and so on. As Mexico, for example, this happens very often because the Royal Navy is spread across the ocean, is fighting Italy and Germany at the same time. Now, quite incredibly, this makes it so that even with just 1 submarine, let me show you. Let's take one of our submarines, this one, and assign it only this to naval invasion support, and as you can see, even with just 1 submarine, we can get green sea sometimes. Now, you may have to wait for a few weeks or even for a few months for this to happen, but eventually it will happen, you will get the green sea and trigger your naval invasion. And again, that's all we need. And this is the first reason why going by sea is still my favorite invasion method. Even as minors, as you can see, either by stealing other fleets or building your own, no matter how modest, it is fairly easy to get green sea and trigger your invasion. Now, when it comes to the naval invasion itself, before the DLC, the eastern coast of the UK was a favorite choice of many. It was usually a bit easier to get the naval superiority in here, and the eastern coast was even less defended than the southern coast. However, things are quite different now. First of all, I usually find it easier to get the naval superiority in the Channel rather than in the North Sea. We also require less range for our planes to cover the Channel rather than this area. And especially, even though we are able to trigger our naval invasion fairly easily on this side as well, the UK is now defending this entire coast as they are defending the southern coast. Now, by all means, it is totally possible to succeed at invading the UK here, but I don't find it easier anymore. One of the advantages of invading the south is that you can aim at Dover and you can stop entirely reinforcements from these two provinces, so they cannot send additional divisions to Dover. You cannot do anything like that when you invade the eastern coast. Another reason is that if you can get Dover or Portsmouth, then you can quickly send additional divisions from the north of France, as the distance is minimal. In eastern UK, your divisions take way longer to get there, giving the UK more chances to intercept them, and more time to stack up additional defensive divisions along the coast. Finally, invading the eastern coast of the UK usually means having to defend two fronts, while in the south you can simply push north. Although this I guess could be considered an advantage as well. In the end, it is definitely possible to succeed with both invasion types, but I personally find it easier to go from the south. Now, before we talk about what to do once you are in the UK, let's briefly cover another option. Let's say that you really cannot get naval superiority, but you can get air superiority instead. You can then use paratroopers to invade the UK. And while the overall concept is similar, there is one major difference. The entire southern coast of the UK is covered by Tier 5 anti-air, which will literally shred your paratroopers as they attempt their invasion. Even if they manage to land, they will be at very low strength, and the UK will just quickly wipe them entirely. Now, you could use strategic bombers and attempt to destroy these anti-airs, but a faster option would be to invade the Hull area instead. An advantage of paratroopers over a naval invasion is that they can indeed target all neighboring provinces and stop reinforcements from reaching Hull. The main disadvantage, however, is that paratroopers are usually weaker than regular offensive divisions, meaning it will take longer for you to get your best divisions on the mainland and ready to push. And timing is really important here. It will take you some time to conquer the harbor, especially if they have two divisions in there, like it's happening now. And even after you take it, you will still need to send your tanks over, which will take time and potentially casualties with the Royal Navy intercepting them. You will be stuck with overall more divisions in the area, making it harder to get enough supplies, and the UK will have extra time to stack up additional divisions in here, which will make it much harder for us to push. Now, once again, it is possible to succeed at this, but it would not be my favorite choice. Speaking of timing, once we manage to get on the mainland either by sea or by air, how do we succeed against so many enemy divisions? The absolute key to success is speed. We need to take down the UK quickly, as for every in-game day, they will spawn or recall more and more divisions. And in order to be faster, you need to have some really good divisions yourself. There are several very good templates that you can use, but I will share with you the ones I used for my runs. As Germany, I used this armored template, which is built around this very solid tank design. And while I'm sure many of you are thinking, what is this madness, invading with tanks is stupid? Well, you know, if it works, it ain't stupid. You're right, of course, tanks have several important malices to naval invasions. But once they disembark, they are the strongest and fastest option we have to apply pressure and quickly capitulate the UK. However, tanks are quite expensive, so if you cannot afford enough armored divisions, then you can opt for infantry with some line artillery, like we did for Hungary in this template. The stats are not as good, of course, but it will get the job done. And of course, being cheap, you can have a lot more of these divisions pushing and applying pressure at the same time. Another very solid option would be a mix of infantry and tanks, like we did for Mexico, using this template and this infantry-oriented tank design. The outcome is very good in terms of stats, much cheaper than a fully motorized armored template, and the extra hardness and armor helps preserving manpower, which was indeed an issue as Mexico. I later upgraded this template to a combat width of 30 by adding another medium tank battalion. Now, regardless of your template of choice, three things are incredibly important and will determine whether you succeed or fail. These are general rules that apply everywhere, but they are particularly important for a tough invasion like this one. So number one, keep your divisions at full strength. don't trigger your invasion with half-strength divisions or your failure will be guaranteed. As I mentioned, for example, as Mexico, I wanted to have another tank battalion because a combat width of 30 is a bit more optimal than 28, but I wouldn't have been able to produce enough medium tanks in time. And again, triggering the invasion not at full strength is very, very bad. Number 2, make sure that at least the 10 divisions you're using for the naval invasion are fully trained. Regular training means 25% extra effectiveness when compared to trained and 50% extra when compared to green. That is massive and we really need it. Number 3, but this is probably the most important, supplies. Getting supplies to the UK will be tough, especially when you cannot hold the naval superiority or you want to preserve your navy. So it is even more important than usual to at least start the invasion with the highest possible amount of supplies. And besides the usual, so the highest motorization priority, which you can select from here, and making sure that you have enough trucks and trains to keep up with logistics. By the way, little side note here, do not forget about trains. Trains are incredibly important. In my first runs as Mexico, I did not build any, and I could not get my supplies up for this invasion, resulting in failure. So you really need to make enough trains. But again, even with the highest motorization priority, trucks and trains, sometimes the game just decides to do weird stuff with your supplies. Now, unfortunately, we don't really have control over this aspect of the game, but one thing we can do is blocking naval regions we don't want our supplies to go through. For example, as you can see here as Germany, for some very weird reasons, our supplies want to go by sea in this area. Now, this doesn't make any sense, they are going straight into the Royal Navy. So what you can do is you can block this sea region, and supplies will stop going through there and will more likely go by land. Do keep in mind that sometimes it is not possible to get 100% supplied armies. As Mexico, for example, since our mainland is very far and we cannot protect convoys going through the ocean. Despite joining the Axis, we cannot really get our divisions up to 100% supplies. So in this case, 80% will have to be enough. In addition to all the things I already mentioned, of course, having the air superiority will greatly help. And so will having spies and a developed spy network in the UK. This will both boost your intel efficiency and make achieving naval superiority easier, as well as decreasing the entrenchment and the max planning for the UK once we disembark, boosting our units in return. So both air superiority and spy networks can significantly increase your chances of a successful invasion. Alright, we're almost at the end. To wrap up this guide, let me mention a few more things and showcase an actual full invasion. I will do it as Mexico, as this is probably the toughest one. We have the weakest navy, the lowest amount of supplies, and we have absolutely no air. So first of all, let's look at the exact positioning I use when I invade the southern coast of the UK. And this is pretty much like a historical sea lion. I always go with 10 divisions, although you can increase that amount if you research Marines 1 and you unlock the very first Marine Special Forces doctrine, as that increases the naval capacity by 5. It can be very convenient, but I couldn't afford to do it as Mexico. So I go with 10 divisions, groups of 2, 4 of them go from Dunkirk, 2 to Dover, 2 to this province here to stop reinforcements. I will send another 2 from here to this province and stop completely reinforcements to Dover. And then the last 4 divisions go from here to Portsmouth and the neighboring province. If you can get either Dover or Portsmouth, then the invasion is usually a success. Now, instead of splitting them around, you can also send all of your divisions from Dunkirk, but splitting them usually makes the invasion a little bit faster and it also helps a bit with supplies. So let's go on and trigger our naval invasion. Our units are on their way. And now, once the invasion triggers, I have a couple more suggestions for you. First of all, I would always assign the 10 divisions you assign to the invasion to a specific army. And that is because in this way you can use a force attack more cheaply. You can prepare all of the other divisions you want to use for the invasion in neighboring provinces, so they will not steal supplies, but they will be ready to move to the UK as soon as you get a harbor. And I would recommend indeed using force attack during the naval invasion, because disembarking is the main priority for us, and anything that can help is welcome. Now, force attacks makes your units unable to retreat, so they will keep pushing at the cost of their strength until they can conquer the province you assigned them to, at least for 7 days, and it will also significantly increase their offense and breakthrough, overall increasing the chances that you are able to disembark. Now, when you do manage to disembark, it's very important to micromanage a little bit your units. The first priority is to take harbors, so you can send more units over, but you also want to start pushing as fast as possible, as soon as possible, because as I mentioned earlier, each day the UK will get additional divisions. Now we managed to conquer Dover, which means we can send over some additional divisions from here. We should be able to get Portsmouth soon as well. There we go. Now we can send over all of our additional divisions and we can merge them all into the same army. Now, even after you disembark, do not stop pushing. Just keep going and keep the pressure up. As you can see, the UK doesn't have that many divisions in here yet, but they already have a lot in the area of London. Now that all of our divisions disembarked, we can give them one front and give them an offensive line. Now we want to push all the way up to Newcastle. We don't really want to stop and we want to trigger this offensive right away. You can let the offensive go more or less fine, and you don't need to micro that much. But you may want to micro a little bit the area of Cornwall, otherwise your units may stop pushing there and allow the Brits to reinforce. And now that Cornwall is taken, you don't really need to worry about much anymore. You can micro them a little bit, but most of the time this push will just continue on its own. It is usually possible to get some nice encirclements in this area since they don't have harbors in here, they cannot retreat. So you can manually select some of your divisions and try to cut off the Brits in the area. And there we go, look at this. Not a big encirclement because they didn't have that many divisions, but not that bad either. These divisions are getting completely destroyed, and we can now focus on the northern side of the UK. Rushing Newcastle is usually enough to end the war. And there we go, the United Kingdom is down. And our invasion was a success. Also, look at Mexico getting 30% of the war score in World War II. How cool is that? And that's really all for this guide, but do feel free to let me know in the comments if anything is not clear or if you need any help. Of course guys, if you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to support the channel by liking the video, subscribing and leaving a comment. Comments really help with YouTube, so you can literally type anything and you will do me a great favor. Other than that, if you stayed with me until now, thank you all for watching and I will see you guys very soon in the next video. Bye bye!